This is the Vanguard, and I'm George. Enjoy our upcoming
Our
episode.
show. Uh, the This show is going to be about body positivity and obesity. And first, we will note that KZSU Stanford has a following disclaimer: the views or opinions expressed by the host DJ or their guests present on KZSU 90.1 FM Stanford do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Leland Stanford Junior University or its associates. We thank you for tuning into this KZSU 90.1 FM radio broadcast, and it is 6 a.m. So now I have a guest here, and together we're going to discuss what it means to be obese in America. We're going to discuss why it matters, and we're also going to then discuss this pernicious new movement to glorify obesity and otherwise just unhealthy behaviors in the American, in lifestyles. Yes, that's the buzzword in American politics. So I don't know. What's your opinion on it?
My opinion is almost decided on this, although I should reserve it for more information from the actual individuals involved in this movement. Do you know the name of one of the movements?
One of the movements? What do you mean?
Yeah, like one of the movements to increase, I guess, the social perception on individuals who happen to be obese.
But,
I'm not saying that as if it's a mistake or like an accident of nature or something.
Oh, you mean like the fat positivity movement?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we can start there.
Yes.
No, there should be a lot of ground to cover.
There will be surely a lot of ground to cover. I don't know that there's any doubt about that.
Right.
But yeah. So first of all, let's take a look at some interesting articles.
Okay.
So let's look at one. Here's a particularly problematic one.
Glamorous looking one.
Oh, glamorous, yes. So this one is called Why I'm Trading Body Positivity for Fat Acceptance.
Okay.
So this is on healthline.com. I don't know how this can possibly be healthy, but it's written by Amy Severson, and it was written June 6, 2019.
So this is rather recent. She's like one of the Vanguard, right?
I don't know. This movement is fairly. It has existed since the 60s, actually. So, on the fringe of various problematic movements in the 60s, of which we're all aware, fat feminism was a big part of this. A large part of it had a very heavy impact on society. So,
and no offense to the actual like feminist movement, although they're like critics, but this like kind of encroaching.
No. Yeah. So this is
space, right?
So, we can discuss feminism as a whole another time, but this is one specific aspect of feminism that I think we can both say deserves specific consideration, independent of some of the other aspects.
Okay, fringe.
So, wow. So the Fat Lobby, or the group I call the Fat Lobby, which is officially the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, that started in the 60s as well, according to this article. And that's good to know. So for reference, the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, or NAAFA, it actually has a website, and you can go there. You can see what they ask politicians to do if they want this weighty endorsement. And it's interesting. So we'll discuss that later. But so we'll talk about this started in the 60s, but again, as you pointed out, she is this author. I guess Amy Severson is in a sense still on the vanguard, because this movement hasn't necessarily been especially mainstream until more recently, when we decided that just about everything's okay. But here's I'll give you a couple of sentences of what she says, and here's the truth. Body positivity first helped me change the way I wanted to view my body. It gave me hope that it would be okay to do that. It wasn't until I noticed the hashtag body positivity influencers made me feel inadequate, like my body was too much to be really okay, that I started to question whether or not I belonged here.
Okay.
And then the sort of... Okay, so here's another subtitle. To be seen, you have to be society's idea of a good fatty.
And she elaborates on that, I presume, right? I'm not even sure what that means.
Yeah,
it's
so...
a very witty expression. But.
So what I think that ends up meaning... Oh, she's a dietitian. So she's saying that as a fat dietitian, people are less likely to take me seriously than a thinner dietitian. Wow, that's
Okay.
isn't that surprising? So for reference, okay, so we
That
can
is
just
incredible.
we can just see from this picture of her, she's clearly heavily overweight, if not obese.
Right.
And for reference,
She's basking in the California sun with the palm trees in the background.
yeah, study after study suggests that even so, there's been this argument for so-called fat but fit, which means say that somebody's cardiovascularly fit, as in that person, say, has pretty good endurance, can run a lot. You know,
That person's in the NFL.
well, yes, I'm sure, but like, let's just think even in a more a broader sense. Like,
Okay.
I think we can accept, and you know, our listeners presumably can accept that somebody who has decent physical endurance should be considered to be fit in a sense. But even then, fat but fit has been studied, and they've compared that to just generic people who are of a more normal body weight. And it turns out that particularly more normal body fat percentage, and it turns out when you compare those people, normal body fat percentage wins out. The fat but fit people still have a lot of higher risk of different ailments, heart disease, diabetes, other kinds of issues. So
So they had a narrow measurement based on like cardiovascular, like endurance, not counting the other factors.
yes,
Whether you live or die.
yes. The obesity causes a wide range of ailments, but but anyway, so you can see by this picture, evidently, and by the definite, what the article has to say, she clearly, you can't take her seriously as a dietitian. If you honestly believe that you can be that, over fat is the clinical term for it, specifically referring to the body fat rather than the overall weight, which isn't quite as indicative, then you really shouldn't be advising people on nutrition because clearly you're not able to manage your own nutrition.
Right. And instead of accepting that as like a kind of critique, right? So you do some self-analysis and maybe I'll remedy my behavior, right? To better serve, I guess, my own self-interest or even to make the case for the clients I happen to have. You then find a way to turn that against the very clients who are seeking help from a dietitian because they don't want to end up like the dietitian who's sitting across from them. And then now they should honor you above a dietitian whose diet is indicative of the... I'm incredulous at that.
Yeah, this is preposterous. I agree. So
and this isn't cherry picking either. Like these are like
no, these are some of the high, very prominent quotes. Some quotes are put in special boxes. Some are the sub headlines. These are clearly nothing, nothing really extraneous. Excuse me. And and here's another another gem. As long as we believe that change and acceptance is solely up to the individual, like the pursuit of weight loss, we are setting them up for failure. So, and I'll actually make a point here. I do think that I reject the concept of acceptance. I'm not going to accept your bad decisions as a good thing. What I will strive to do is treat you with respect as I would anybody else. Because, at the end of the day, I think that's important, and I think we can agree that. But at least my personal perspective is that, we should... There is something to be said for peer pressure, I was a chubby little kid. People made fun of me. I wasn't so chubby anymore. And it was good for me, too. It feels better. You're healthier. It's good. I think we just need to... We need to encourage each other to make good decisions, and sometimes that's not going to be super comfortable, but if it's done respectfully enough, I think it can be a good thing. I don't know. What's your perspective?
No. I also think that there's a... Now, I hate to say... They'll say, peer pressure is like this, a form of like bullying, right? And
not always.
No, definitely. And I would say there is reason for this kind of like social pressure, right? So the concept of the big other, right? One of my professors, Sharkey, at Cornell, used to talk about this big other concept. Imagine if one didn't think that they were always being watched or analyzed, right? You can imagine someone like succumbing to their base impulses, right? So when there's no consequence for it, right? So the kind of like social consequence, right, allows people to at least like stay in line, right? Or at least adhere to some of their moral codes. This isn't as serious of a topic, except that death comes at the end of like not trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle. But to actually think acceptance is solely up to the individual, like whenever the criteria is acceptance, that's when I think things become problematic.
Yeah, also
just in and of itself, not actually like living.
The idea that change is solely up to the individual. I would actually mostly I would agree with that. But I will say that I think our culture isn't necessarily conducive to healthy lifestyles, and that I think is something that we as a country, we as a culture need to consider. Why is it that we've made it such that sometimes people seem to, obesity is so normalized that, people who are moderately overweight are considered to be the norm, and people who are the healthy weight are considered not to be
anomalous.
Yeah, they're considered not healthy. They're considered to be, too thin.
Or ill, yeah.
No, exactly. I mean, I think that we need to decide, like, while yes, it is at the end of the day your responsibility to take care of your own health. It is also, I think, it's unfortunate when we glorify really nasty, horrible foods. When we glorify
Right.
and expect people to be, heavy. That's not a good thing. And that's part of the problem here. So I do think that, as much as this character, Miss Severson, seems to believe that it's all collective responsibility, as much as that's not really true, it's also fair to point out, though, that I think while it certainly can't be forced, I think as a society we should consider, just based on trying to be good citizens, good people, we should consider, is it the right thing to do maybe to examine what we lift up as good in our society and whether that should change.
Right. No. I definitely agree with that. The social argument is very persuasive, especially the one you're making. What I will say is that normally something that is difficult to attain is it has like a higher value, right? So although it may be easier to eat, right?
And
food that's not right, and keep eating, right? It's easier to do that, right? And it may be more difficult to abstain. There's encouragement to eat like these kind of like unhealthy foods, right? America's built on that kind of advertisement, constant campaigning for you to like self-indulge, right? But the person who works out and is physically fit, like, why do we admire them, right? Because there's a kind of suffering involved in there, right?
Yeah, I mean,
like they have chosen to do that. That's honorable.
I think we admire for many reasons. Right. One is, I think, objectively that we realize that's what, that means the body is healthy.
Right.
I mean, we're evolutionarily wired to favor people who are going to be able to
carry on the species.
Well, yeah, carry on the species and, give, have healthy offspring.
Right.
So, I mean, that's one thing. But on the other hand, yes, there is a secondary level, and that's your point, is that we do respect people who, go the extra mile to do, and especially, I think one of the things I've noticed, at least in my experience, is, people who historically have had weight problems and then, do their very best and do improve to some degree, they are definitely treated with great respect.
Right. So like
when they can, they're admired, And even if, that means maybe they're a bit heavy, but they're a lot less heavy than they used to be, that is considered to be progress for them. And again, and also that medically makes sense, because even for, very obese people, losing even 5% of your body weight or 10%, that can make a big difference in terms of health outcomes.
Right.
That can be, even disproportionate to the amount of the weight you're losing compared to what maybe would be optimal to lose. Like those first few pounds that heavy people lose often are like the most important and most consequential health-wise.
Oh, well said.
Well, no, I mean, they just and I think we need to just consider that, again, one thing I will say that I guess some parts of fitness culture I've heard maybe have a problem with is just pushing people to unrealistic goals, like I'm 100 pounds overweight and I'm going to fix that within a year. No, you're not going to fix that within a year probably, but if you can fix a third of that within a year, you're you're making progress.
Right, but that doesn't obviate your responsibility.
No.
The fact that the expectation may
No, it doesn't. I think the problem, though, is that we set people up to think that they have to fail. So again, I think the other thing we just need to consider is like we need to remember, that progress, being better tomorrow than you are today is a good thing, even if that's not as much. So I agree, it doesn't obviate the responsibility. However, I think we're creating when you basically make people feel hopeless, that doesn't help. But again, also that's what body positivity does. It also pretty much says, you may as well give up, accept your corpulence, it's not there's no hope. And I think that's just not a good attitude to have.
And I think that's why you said it was pernicious. That's why you said the movie was pernicious.
Pernicious, I think, is the proper word for this.
Absolutely.
Well, because it also is kind of sneaky, People don't, one of the parts of the definition of pernicious is, something that doesn't necessarily seem quite
like
as harmful.
Right?
Yeah, it's insidious, yes. And I think that we need to know that's because, why is that? Because on the one, on its face, it seems that we're only being nice by telling people that, you know, their bodies are okay. You know, that there's nothing wrong here, even when there most clearly is, because, you know, admittedly, it's not something anybody wants to hear. No, so my uncle is a doctor,
okay.
and, you know, no patient wants to hear you're morbidly obese. I mean, who wants to hear that? Honestly,
The M word, right?
yes, yeah. I mean, well, and that's like, I mean, that's scary. I mean, it
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
because,
no, I should have
because
laughed
it can
that
kill.
off. I'm
No, no,
being
no, 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 no.
insensitive. Sorry.
It is a little fun. No, it's a little funny, but like I agree. You know, but on the other hand, is it really merciful or the right thing to do not to tell people this? Like, what kind of doctor are you, or what kind of friend are you if you really care about somebody? Wouldn't you encourage that person to do whatever is in that person's power to be as healthy as possible? You know, don't you quite frankly just want that person to be around and not only alive, but like healthy as long as possible? You know, so that they don't have, you know, heart problems, knee problems, diabetes, all these other things that can be caused by, you know, obesity. You know, why would, if you're a friend, why would you ever, you know, not be there for your friend when maybe your friend needs a little bit of a push in the right direction?
If that's a criteria for friendship, then people don't have a lot of friends.
Well, people are just weak. Well, I mean, the other way I look at it is like, so okay, let's go with the opposite. Like, okay, so people might not say that to a morbidly obese person, but like, say somebody else who's in, you know, a similarly dire situation. Let's say somebody who's anorexic.
Right. Good point.
Wouldn't you want to help that person? You know. And
that is an excellent point, because no one would dare tell someone who's anorexic that
like,
this is okay. Like
a
you
good thing.
never say that because they're self-sabotaging.
Well,
right?
you wouldn't say that because it's very evident that it's not. You know,
Right,
somebody who's
right.
anorexic is clearly not healthy. Like, that's not a good thing.
Right, good
but you
point.
know, but you're not saying that out of anything except, you know, genuine concern for the person's well-being, because you
Right.
want that person, you know, ideally at some point to be able to overcome this, and, you know, at minimum not to be starving him or herself. You know, not to be throwing up all the time,
Right.
you know, because that can, you know, the other thing people don't realize is what specifically are the complications of anorexia. So, you know, that can cause heart attacks, interestingly enough, because if you eat up all your fat and all your muscle, where do you eventually go? Cardiac muscle, and that's not good
Right.
to start losing some of that.
So
that-
just as a quick point,
Yeah.
do you think that the argument can be made, because we have this kind of like hatred or animosity? Maybe it was too strong of a term for that, but this kind of I'll say animosity towards, or lack of acceptance towards, the obese, that we then encourage people to like commit acts like that, like anorexia. Right?
I think in some extreme parts of, like, I think there are some, especially like unrealistic fitness standards, that maybe cause that. You know, people just like see, you know, people who do have are extremely fit, and, you know, they think that, well, you know, I never can be that way. I want to, you know, I want it so badly. I'm going to do stupid things to lose weight. And
Right.
I think that can be a problem. I don't think having the standard of being healthy causes that. Because also,
Well said.
well, because I mean, I also think, like, you know, within the category of healthy, there is some diversity of what constitutes that, you know.
Diversity.
Well, by diversity, I mean, like, not exactly, you know, it's not that for this height you have to be exactly this weight, you know, not even a tenth of a pound above or below. You know, certainly there are ranges that constitute being healthy. And
Right.
also, you know, I mean, I think we also recognize that, or should recognize that, there is an inherent difference between being mildly overweight and morbidly obese. And I think, though, that, like, I think that we just have to make sure that people see that, you know, it doesn't, you don't have to fix yourself in a day. And
Right.
often, you know, slower progress, you know, in anything, you know, slow and steady wins the race. It's not just about if you're overweight and you're losing weight. It's about, you know, like, quite frankly, if you build good study habits over, you know, a long period of time, if you build good credit habits, you know, things like that. You know, there's a lot that can be said for, you know, just having realistic expectations and just trying your very best to do, you know, to make that next step every day, and then eventually making progress. So I think the biggest thing is just people need to be able to establish realistic goals. And once we can do that, then once we also, another thing is, like, sometimes people make fun of fat people who are in the gym. Like, that's the most counterproductive thing possible. If someone's, you know, they're just trying to be healthy,
Right.
you know, I'm not, you know, but most of all, just don't stare at them, you know, don't even give them attention. But if you're going to give them any attention, you know, say good, you know, congratulate them for being there, you know, say that, you know, support their efforts. Because, you know, I think we all need to support each other when we try to improve. Like, you wouldn't make fun of, a student who was, say, previously failing for keeping going to class and maybe going to a tutoring session. Would you? I mean, if that person is really trying to improve.
I can imagine someone making fun of that
someone
person.
would, but like
Right.
that we would consider that to be a bad thing. We would consider, say, an anorexic person. We consider them going to, say, a therapist to help them fix that problem. We would not ever really make fun of somebody for just trying to improve, even if it seems as though the results are coming slowly. So I think similarly, we just need to be more encouraging of progress, like saying, okay, maybe you're still significantly overweight, but you are better off than you were, and we need to make that. But, also I think more importantly, this also distracts from the point that we also do need to we need to denormalize obesity. You make it so that people who are really big...
Well, isn't it normal now? I mean, we can't denormalize.
Denormalize.
Right.
I mean, we need to make it so that it's no longer considered, within the range of acceptable outcomes. We need to make it so that, it is something that's uncomfortable, not because we dislike people, but precisely because we care about their well-being.
Right.
We need to encourage people to be healthier. And I think that also another thing that I've noticed is an issue is like often with obese children, because as we see in some recent statistics.
Let's go back to the data.
Yeah, there's definitely some data that shows that, okay, so the vast majority of American adults are obese, but also 13% of American children were obese in 2013. We're in the top 15 countries in the world with the greatest obesity prevalence in children.
Right.
And so being obese as a child is sometimes even worse than just even if you become obese as an adult, because that causes cardiovascular damage and other issues early on.
Right.
And then, even if you lose weight, you're already saddled with those problems. So,
right, because your body's working overtime.
We need to make sure that we can combat these problems and make sure that people, know that it's not something that we should be celebrating. And
I mean, do you think there's any credibility? Is there any legitimacy behind the actual movement? I mean, I definitely laughed them off as like a kind of widespread social phenomenon for like whatever you do in life.
Like you should be accepted for it?
No, absolutely. When like quite the contrary is the case. Like whatever you do in life, there will be consequences for it. Like nature.
Positive or negative, depending on what you do. But yeah.
Absolutely, right? It's like kind of like cause and effect like concept, right?
Yeah, you need to be ready for the consequences. Yeah, I think that there really isn't a lot of validity to it, to be honest. I mean, look, I can see why maybe, they get tired of people being made fun of. And I agree that, straight up mocking should be reserved for very specific instances. That should not be the norm. But
it's like public shaming, right? We do that to like politicians, though.
Yeah, I mean, like, look,
we do that to everybody.
Look, even Trump told Chris Christie to quit eating so many Oreos. So, I mean, I think that we can. There are times when it's kind of funny. There are times when it can be overwhelming. I think especially with children, you do have to be careful because a lot of times they're kind of sensitive. So,
right. Children are probably the most like vicious. Adults have more subtle means of trying to.
Other thing with children is that and this is another thing I wanted to bring up with children when I brought up childhood obesity.
Okay.
So, our obesity rate for children in America is 13%, or at least it was in 2013, and that's about 2.5, or that's like, I think, 2.5 times as much as anywhere else in the world,
right.
or at least the average of the rest of the world. And I think we need to look at also when kids are obese, often part of that's the parents' fault.
You say part. I'm going to say a whopping majority.
Well, okay. So as kids get older, they do have a little bit more,
agency.
Agency, yes. But I mean, I definitely think yes, to some degree, whatever that degree exactly is. A lot of that's the parents' fault, and we need to decide. We need to definitely make parents feel obligated to do things. Because I've actually read some cases where parents they weren't sure what to do with their kids. Because on the one hand, it can be uncomfortable to tell your kid basically stop eating. But on the other hand, and they're, sometimes kids are really obese. You have to have bigger interventions, sometimes even
like Dr. Phil type interventions.
Well, or like a lap band surgery or something like that. I mean,
wow. Good point.
So this isn't that common, but it happens. And I think we need to consider that we also need to make sure that those parents have, proper support. Because, I think a lot of times people will shame the parents for like, oh, you're cutting off your child, how cruel of you, when in reality the parent's just trying to look out for that child's best interest, which is, I think, it is a fundamental role of a parent. Right. As a parent, it's your responsibility to care for your child.
I almost remember my girlfriend telling me one time that this could also be a symptom of like food insecurity, because if Right, and I mean that's kind of like counterintuitive because like you don't have enough food, so then how do you then like eat to such a degree that you actually become obese? But I guess the food is so poor in value or like nutritional value that it actually like does some kind of like essentially damage to your body.
Essentially, it's very high calorie and low in other nutrients. Okay, so that's if you don't have access to good food, that's one thing that might happen. And I think another thing we could say about that is that that's an issue because a lot of another problem is like food stamps. So actually, no. It's not food stamps in principle. It's also like specifically the way they're administered.
All right. This is gonna be enlightening.
No, okay. So Minnesota, Indiana, New York, and I think maybe some other states, but I know those 3 states all tried to cause food stamps not to be able to be spent on, say, like desserts and junk food.
That's true. They want food.
The whole idea is they wanted to help lower income people on food stamps make better decisions, and particularly because a lot of times food stamps are given to children. So especially,
right.
I mean, at some point adults are going to make decisions for themselves, but certainly they do not want poor children who rely on food stamps to be raised to eat only bad food and then to have these terrible health habits and then end up living shorter lives and being less healthy. At this point, the government's attitude was, in these states, if we're going to be paying for this, we don't want to be funding the raising of kids in an extremely unhealthy manner. And I think that was a reasonable desire, but courts struck it down. They said that's discrimination. I think that, for one thing, and this is a topic for another day, but this, in my opinion, wasn't really the judiciary's role. The judiciary for years has been, reaching past its responsibilities, but we also need to look at, like, what policy-wise, that's not right. It's not right to set children up for failure. That's not what we should do if we care about children and their health. And I think that's part of why people, when you say food insecurity, it's not even just the food insecurity. It's food insecurity means often you're on food stamps, and if food stamps are efficiently spent, and often where if you're poor, you're disproportionately going to live in bad parts of town that aren't going to have real grocery stores. Right. And your food stamps, if they can buy cake and that's how mama can make you happy at night, that's, you're going to be too young to understand how bad that is for you. And, eventually you're going to develop habits and be already kind of heavy and might already have, asthma and other problems that can be related to obesity that, at the point that it's going to be a lot harder to reverse those trends once you get older and maybe become educated.
You know what I find ironic about that, once again, you have this kind of like so-called benevolent actor, like acting on behalf, right, of this like oppressed like community, and yet like the consequences of their actions happen to be more detrimental than the purported enemy, right? So again, it's like the obesity case that she brings up, right? Somehow like by not being accepted, right? That's like a terrible thing. So be who you are, and maybe I'm making a blanket generalization and just disregard, right? All the like health complications are gonna come from you continuing to live like this, right? Like, is that these oppressive people trying to make you become this fashion model in the middle of like New York City that's on a billboard? Like, that's not what they're telling you to become. They're just saying, how about you just like live a little bit longer, right? And maybe some people are harsher.
And also like while you're alive, make sure that those days of your life aren't spent, with end stage heart disease. Make sure those days of your life are spent such. Okay, so I mean, let's say you have kids. Don't you want to live long enough that when you're a grandparent or even a great-grandparent, you can play with the little kids, you can be there.
Right.
Well, and don't you want to live through retirement such that not only you're alive during retirement, but you're healthy enough to enjoy it.
Right.
I mean, I think that, I hate to sound paternalistic because really the point here isn't to like make decisions for people, but I do think that to an extent, as fellow citizens, not as government, but especially as fellow citizens,
right,
we should want to encourge people, as
it's
friends.
Like community building.
Well, I mean, also, right? I mean, as we were talking about earlier, though, it's the idea of friends and family too. My friends and so I mean, I would never sometimes I disagree with different decisions, unrelated to health, but even just other decisions family members and friends of mine make, and if I think that it's actually going to harm them, I'm gonna speak up, not really out of being obnoxious or rude, but because I care about their well-being. I certainly, and my parents have said the same things when I've tried to do stupid things before. Right. I mean, my friends have said things too. I think that this isn't paternalism. This isn't hateful. This is just being a good friend or being a good family member. Now, we'll take a break for a moment to read an announcement. The Stanford Archive of Recorded Sound is a wonderful resource for those interested in classical music and jazz. The archive contains thousands of historical recordings and numerous collections of printed materials. It's located in the Braun Music Center on the Stanford campus. To learn more, to learn how you can take advantage of all the archive offers, visit on the web at lib.stanford.edu/ars. That's lib.stanford.edu/ars. Okay, so where were we? About people being paternalistic or not, or about how it's not paternalistic so much as just caring. Yeah, so I think we should move on to some other information that's relevant. I found this really good article. So generally, I won't recommend The Guardian, but this is actually a solid article in The Guardian, a very good one about how problematic it is to encourage people to be positive about obesity. It's called "It's Not Fine to Be Fat: Celebrating Obesity is Irresponsible." It's by Lizzie Cernick. And its sort of subheadline, I think, is really the strongest point. It says, "No one should be bullied for their weight or food choices, but fat pride promotes dangerous weight levels."
A less glamorous thumbnail Photoshop.
Yes, it's yes. You see this obese couple.
Right.
Hopefully,
not basking in the California sunlight with palm trees. Like that's...
Yes, that's true.
Right.
Also, I think it has an interesting point. So it discusses that Sophie Hagen, who is a comedian, last year accused the cancer research group, this group called Cancer Research, of bullying fat people after it tweeted about how obesity can be a risk factor for cancer, which it can be, especially for things like colon cancer, but other cancers as well. And yeah, definitely one of the things I remember reading was actually that colon cancer is increasing significantly among millennials because millennials are, quite frankly, so fat that statistically more of them have this as a risk factor and thus have a higher risk of colon cancer. And I mean, you laugh, but that's people's lives at risk because they're just too heavy and it causes all kinds of problems. So I think...
but these all seem to be like choices that people are making, right? Like, I mean, there's coercion by, I guess you could say, food companies, maybe fast food restaurants, right? They're kind of like stranglehold on like media or something. I mean, I'm sure that could be, right, an argument for that. But at the bottom line, there's like some real intentional decision making being made, even amongst the millennials. So that's the reason for my laughter, that it's super self-induced despite their
absolutely
highfalutin aims.
So some statistics cited in this article that I think are really good, and this is mainly UK focused, but I think the trends have
originated here.
Well, they're slightly worse here, but I mean, essentially we are very demographically, well, in certain aspects are similar to the UK. So not, demographically, obviously we are more diverse, and they also have more Asians and a lot fewer black people, many fewer Hispanics for obvious reasons. But no, but we're similar in many ways, actually, more than you would think. Excuse me. So it says that in the past, so from 2017 to 2018, weight-related hospital admissions, according to the National Health Service in the UK, increased by 18%. That's just 1 year. And then more than a quarter of the British adults at that point were obese, and that's even higher in the U.S., by the way, an even wider swath of our population. And so it turns out that, so when I mentioned the fat but fit, this is what they're talking about. So it says that overweight people who exercise regularly and consider themselves fat but fit, and this is a quote from the article, still had a 28% increased risk of heart disease compared to their slimmer counterparts. Obesity can, in addition to diabetes and heart disease, osteoarthritis, gout, breathing ailments, hypertension, other things can be influenced by obesity. So, we need to look at it's just not responsible to encourage this kind of behavior. So, I would say that another thing that is worth considering. So let me look this up real quick.
Can I make a quick analogy?
Yes.
I mean, no one would dare encourage the smoking of cigarettes, right?
Not these days.
Right. But and then the companies that did and said, well, it's right. I don't know, it has some like special qualities. I don't know. Maybe that it gives you, right. There's kind of like this masculine, rough, like cool, hip characteristic that's attributed to it, right? But people who promoted that, right, at least like the companies, they received massive backlash, right? They were being deceptive, right? And now in this case, right, or like eating, right, is like causing, or eating certain type of foods is causing you to have these like health ailments in the same way that smoking tobacco causes health ailments. Like you can't mask that as being some like healthy thing that we should hold on to and encourage. You wouldn't do it for that industry. I just don't see how this one is any different, right?
Yeah, okay, so I can't find the article now, but so Nike, when it introduced like severely overweight mannequins to model its plus size wear. No, I remember reading an article.
What is severely overweight mannequin? I've never seen one of those.
You can see.
I've never seen one. I guess you can just type it in then.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, look at that. That's clearly not. If that were a person who would not be healthy.
Right. Okay. Damn.
So yeah, you see my point. So.
But there are people who actually are of that body type or that stature, right? So Nike being this kind of like profitable company, they would do well to like market towards that demographic. Because
the problem though is they're creating running clothes for, as an article I found a while ago mentioned, people who can't even run. I no, and it sounds as though I'm mocking, but no, the point of the article was not laughing. It is to be very serious that they're encouraging a false perception. Yeah, I agree. This is kind of funny. But they're encouraging a false perception of reality. You know, they're saying that, okay, they're confusing people. Because Nike, okay, so would we agree?
Nike's brilliant marketing too, by the way.
They are brilliant marketers. But we would agree, though, I think, right? And I think our listeners would, too,
right.
That, like, when you hear Nike, you think fitness. Like, you think, okay, these people know something about fitness, so I should trust them. And
right.
I think that's a reasonable thing to believe.
Right.
But when they're telling you that you can be obese and be fit, we know, that's not true, but
right.
I think they're misleading a lot of people, especially perhaps a lot of people with lower access to information,
right.
Lower information consumers, into believing that that's somehow okay.
Or is Nike actually like helping people to begin their journey? So they're right at the genesis of someone's like transformation, and then introducing them right to like this like kind of sportswear, athletic wear will encourage them to continue on that journey. I mean, I'm saying this, and like, there's a part of me that definitely wants to believe that, but I have to at least entertain the counter argument, so that the audience definitely knows that we are taking this seriously.
No, we are taking this seriously.
Nike is brilliant, man.
No, Nike is master at marketing, but like I would definitely say though that that sure, maybe it's encouraging people, but
right.
I think there is something to be said for like encouraging people to see that athletic wear only exists for people who can engage in athletic activities. No, I think it's important. Like,
right.
So for a long time, Abercrombie and Fitch wouldn't carry plus sizes. And I think
right.
that
it was like a brand, right? Like a brand.
They wouldn't carry
part
it.
Of their brand.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, they wouldn't carry such sizes. It just wouldn't. It wasn't around. And I think that to some degree there is benefit in doing that, because I think that you need to make clear that look, these are supposed to be appealing. They're supposed to be for healthy-looking people. Like these really large sizes can't be healthy. So I mean, I think that for Nike especially, more so than Abercrombie and Fitch, as a vendor of athletic wear, they should be selling things to athletic bodies, not to the idea is that they should represent athleticism. Maybe
right.
not always just the perfect athletic body, because that's a little bit unrealistic to expect for a major market. But
right.
I think that adding these sizes for, again, people who probably couldn't run more than a mile,
right?
If that, I think it sends the wrong message. It sends the message that by wearing these clothes, you can look athletic and all when you're clearly not.
but what about football players? There are some linemen who they run faster than us, bro.
Yeah, well, these were women's clothes too.
Yeah, okay,
and also they're an exception.
That
like,
negates the argument. Sorry.
And also, like, I would say,
I'm trying everything.
No, I agree. Linemen, like, okay, so sure they have a fair amount of body fat, but they're usually more muscular than the average person of their BMI.
Oh, by
for
far.
sure.
By far. Yeah,
no.
By far.
That's what I'm saying,
far.
though. So, like, I also, when I
far.
say obesity, I'm specifically referring to, like, fat obesity, not just, there are two definitions. There's the weight-based definition, which I think is less useful, and the, body fat percentage-based definition. And that's the more relevant one, because body fat percentage is what affects your body chemistry, et cetera. That's what can actually cause you a lot of health problems. So, I mean, I will say the linemen, I think, are not as relevant in this case.
Right. No. Well said. Well said.
And also, this was women's attire, so not too many women were playing American football. A few, but not many.
Not yet, sir.
Not so many. But yeah. So that's, I think, kind of moot. Okay. So part of the reason that I bring all of this up is that we still have so many people writing articles like 5 Things You Need to Know About Fat Love by Laurel Dickman. A fat, fashionable feminist writer, according to her byline. But yeah. So
that's like a kind of like qualification in a sense, right? Right.
Yeah,
that byline, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of this stuff isn't even decent for speaking of on the radio, so I'm not even going to bring it up. This is gross. But let it suffice to say that some level of this, I mean, there's got to be a problem here. There's something wrong with people who are, feel the need to justify their poor health.
Lack of discipline?
Yeah, lack of discipline.
It's a widespread social phenomenon, though.
In the most grotesque possible terms, too. Right. Yeah, that's why I didn't end up reading the article. But let it suffice to say they were describing things that nobody wanted to read about. But, okay, so here's an article, though, that I think is actually very relevant. It's called The Sad Truth About Fat Acceptance by Anna Slatz. It's on Quillette. So it tells the story a little bit about Sonali Rashatwar, who describes herself as a queer, non-binary fat sex therapist. Now, what that means, I don't even know. I don't want to know. But
that's real?
Yes.
Okay.
But the reason that this is relevant is that she's a paid speaker. So she went to deliver a 2-hour lecture called Race as a Body Image Issue at St. Olaf College's Health and Wellness Center.
In Minnesota, right? Another reference to Minnesota.
And it's a social justice class, by the way. So very important that apparently the justice for obese people.
More social justice entrepreneurs.
So
shortage of them.
Interestingly, Rashatwar, in her video, she's visibly very obese. She asks, "Is it my fatness that causes my high blood pressure, or is it my experience of weight stigma?" So, yeah, I mean, while admittedly high blood pressure can be, influenced by stress and by other, social factors, it is preposterous to, live in the fictional world in which one's physique doesn't impact one's physical health. I mean, that makes absolutely no sense. And interestingly, Rashatwar continued to liken fat phobia to eugenics and to Nazi science. And also, this is one that I actually find really concerning because it also, delegitimizes legitimate parenting approaches to try to help fat children. It says that she said that a child cannot consent to being on a diet the same way a child cannot consent to having sex. I mean, despite,
Well, this issue is like, there's like a radical element to it. Not radical as in like a person who is truly committed to a cause and understands it through and out, but radical as in kind of extending it beyond the realm of reason and using any means to make their point.
Yeah, as absurd as this sounds, it's apparently reality. I mean, I don't even really know how to respond to that, but yeah, she charged $5,000 for her speech, by the way. So
they paid her. They paid her.
Yes, this health center, this health and wellness center. So that's like if at Stanford, if I guess Vaden or like one of the Arriaga gyms brought in a fat positivity speaker to talk about how obesity really isn't a problem. Right. So that's like student funds probably going to this. It's absurd. So also, Rashatwar acknowledged the fact that St. Olaf College is on native land. The odd part here is that Native Americans, Native Canadians, Native Americans in America, etc., are both heavily obese. Like, pun not intended really here. I mean, the point is that they both have a major problem with this, and it endangers their health significantly. That's part of the reasons they have such low life expectancies compared to white Canadians and white Americans, or even, sometimes compared to black and Hispanic Americans, or Asian Americans, or Asian Canadians. Like, it's a health crisis for them. Why would you virtue signal about social justice for them, and then proceed to encourage a worldview that can only make one of their worst health crises even worse.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, to me, this is just.
Yeah, right.
This isn't even funny. This is just sad, and it's harmful. I mean, it's something that, to be honest, makes me angry. That we don't care enough about people's health
Right.
to refrain. We're not even asking her to run around talking about how obesity is an issue. I mean, as obese as she is, I don't think it would be very convincing. But and there would be no running around, period. But at minimum, refrain from encouraging an actively harmful worldview. Yeah, like it's the same as one interesting thing is that within gay communities, smoking is actually a big problem. It's like, so if you know that, don't go talking about gay rights struggles and then go talking about how smoking's okay, because that group already has a problem with that. I mean, this is inexcusable. I mean, to me, it's just really irresponsible.
It seems like profiteering to me.
Oh, absolutely.
In like the largest sense. You definitely recognize a problem. You see that there's a group, right, that is sympathetic to your cause. I mean, it's not. I don't even think it's her cause. I mean, well, she actually happens to be clinically obese, but not even like particularly her cause. But she endorses it, and there are people who are sympathetic towards that, and then you utilize that to profit off of, while you're actually like helping to ensure their inevitable destruction, right? And it's like all self-inflicted, like at this point.
Absolutely.
Included by the so-called heroes. But
so now we'll pause for one more announcement. So Scholarship America believes that every student, regardless of financial status, deserves an opportunity to go to college. Since its founding, Scholarship America has distributed more than $3 billion to 2 million students worldwide. It supports a number of leading programs, including Dollars for Scholars, Dream Keepers, and scholarship management services. You can help make a difference to the lives of students. To learn more, visit scholarshipamerica.org. Okay.
Well said, too. Shout out to Scholarship America.
Yes, absolutely.
Man, absolutely.
So another thing, this writer of this article, Anna Slatz, she points out that...
does she make a critique at all?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, yes, she's critiquing this for sure.
Right.
So she introduces this, and then she mentions that Rashadwar, in giving the speech in the video, she essentially, she's huffing and puffing. She, has to take pauses to breathe during her speech.
Well, we'd actually have to see the speech to verify that.
Yeah, but no. I mean, yeah. I fully believe it, though. I've read articles about this woman before. This woman
she's infamous, right?
Yes, yeah. She's extremely infamous as being so obese and just so problematic in general.
Right.
But
well, you see the kind of comparisons that she's even making, the kind of like rhetorical tricks that she's willing to resort to, right? So, I mean, that's indicative of character. A few things that she had done. Yes. I'll just say that.
No, and
bluntly.
The thing is, Anna Slatz used to be obese. She writes, Rashadwar claims that she is a survivor of fat phobia. I am a survivor of fat. I share her use of the word survivor because when I was standing at 4'10" and 300 pounds, my obesity almost took my life. A kinesthesiologist friend told me that the physical toll on my body was the equivalent of more than 400 pounds of weight on an average woman. I had sleep apnea to the point where I woke up with headaches every morning due to lack of oxygen. I had developed the characteristic black ring of dying diabetic flesh around my neck. My menstrual cycle had abated, because it's a woman, completely, and the smallest amount of activity, going to the laundry room in my apartment complex, had become so difficult that I was forcing family members to do mundane tasks on my behalf. So listen to that.
Wow.
I mean, sure, that's a harrowing tale, and yes,
Yeah.
most obese people even aren't quite that obese, but, I think that it reminds, the fact that, this lady is willing to share her story, that's important. It's important that she's willing to call out. She calls out by name health at every size. This idea that any weight, any physical size is somehow okay. This idea that you can be 4'10" and 300 pounds and having that fleshy ring of dying diabetic flesh around your neck, and that's somehow not killing you. I imagine if you are smoking a pack of cigarettes a day,
right,
and you are wheezing. Imagine if someone told you you can smoke as many cigarettes a day as you're healthy.
Right.
And studies today are linking at least extreme levels of obesity to outcomes at least as bad as, if not worse than, the outcomes of heavy smoking.
Right.
So, this is quite frankly at this point, this is a humanitarian disaster that we're telling people who may honestly be misled to some extent, that their obesity is okay. I mean, would we say that Philip Morris and other, tobacco companies were great when they weren't telling people about the risks of their products?
Yeah.
Would we tell people that, say other kinds of,
You can say
bad...
you can even say like narcotics, like when someone has an
Yeah, I was about to say
addiction,
drugs,
right?
Yeah. Or like alcohol. I mean, would it be fair to say that, say that Jim Beam, whiskey company, should, the company that makes Jim Beam, should they just all of a sudden quit? Tell people, drink as much of that stuff as you want. It's not going to harm you a bit. No, I mean this is just.
Although the commercials do kind of give off that vibe, but like
also a lot of alcohol and cigarettes today have to have disclaimers.
Right. Good point.
I mean, honestly, at this point, we need to have obesity disclaimers. On. I don't know, especially on healthy products. I think that I'm not much of a nanny state type of person, but if we're having that for tobacco, heck, if we have that for like coffee, and in the state of California, all these different things can be carcinogens. Why not mention, anything that, anything that has anything to do with obesity? That should definitely have a warning on it because,
right.
I mean, this is
like unhealthy food in general.
This is dangerous.
Eaten in large quantities.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I've had relatives, I've known other people in my community, I come from a very obese area in general, who have, died a lot earlier than they could have. And also, even if they lived a fairly long time, also had a lot of years of their lives where they weren't very, they weren't able to do much. They were extremely unhealthy.
Right.
And this is all because of their obesity and the complications from it. So there's no way that you can make an honest argument, that this doesn't deserve some attention. And I'm sorry to all these fat positivity activists out here, but there's no way you're going to convince me that this isn't worthy of scorn and shame. I mean, we need to shame the people who will go out there and
parading
lie.
Around, yeah,
and who
absolutely.
and also specifically though, the people who will go out there and lie to susceptible, perhaps gullible people about these issues. The people who will tell kids, especially. And this is an issue, particularly, I guess, young women sometimes have body image issues. But, don't you dare go tell those women who maybe are struggling with their weight that all of a sudden it's okay to be as obese as they want.
No,
I mean, that's taking advantage of someone in a vulnerable position and saying that, well, here's something terrible you can do, but I'm going to tell you it's okay. And maybe you, being in a vulnerable position, emotionally, intellectually, whatever, are maybe going to accept that. I mean, no one should be making that decision. No one should be okay with telling people, such a blatant lie. We don't accept, dangerous lies in any other context. Why should we with obesity?
Oh, man. Well said, man. Well said.
Yeah. So, if we want to,
I just find it odd how you can have two people who are in a similar like traumatic situation, or they're both at like a crossroads where it's clear that their behavior, maybe there's some genetic predisposition towards being obese, whatever factors have like contributed to them being at a point in their life where they recognize that they are obese and that there's a serious like health crisis, right, that's imminent. And one person can go about rectifying that by changing their lifestyles and behaviors and then actively encouraging other people to do the same, right? And then there's another person who will continue to like self-indulge and then profiteer off of it and sabotage the lives of others. Like that doesn't show you two different personality types. And not that the people who are advocating fat positivity are of that like latter type, right? This young lady who's being paid and probably selling like books and like merchandise and all kinds of stuff, right? Who's kind of like a quasi-celebrity. That is disturbing, that image right there.
Oh yes, okay.
Sorry. That is
just a typical prehistoric Venus of Willendorf deal.
Right, but just showing how those two different worldviews, they lead to different outcomes. One just fundamentally is more noble, right, and it's uplifting more people, right, and it's not shaming, it's not attacking people, it's not going after someone in like a vulnerable state. It's actually trying to encourage and uplift them by being a paragon, by being the example, right? I don't see how the other version is helpful in any sense to society, even if it's for a select few who are clearly going to do that anyway. That shouldn't be the model for everyone else who actually wants to live a better life, right? And I just think this is indicative of a larger like societal tendency that we seem to be witnessing. So I don't blame McDonald's for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that McDonald's. I mean, it definitely has a heavy influence
Right.
in this
Ray
problem.
Kroc is a genius too. I mean, that guy's just a
Yeah,
genius.
but I mean, on the other hand, at the end of the day, you can't blame McDonald's for selling what people are willing to buy.
Right.
So I mean, we need to quit being so obsessed with convenience, with what tastes good. I mean, it's just very much to me, it's also an issue of virtue. And this will get me in somebody's naughty list, or in somebody's naughty book, on somebody's naughty list, whatever. But to me, a lot of times, not all cases, but a lot of cases, people who are obese, you have to wonder, is it just about, enjoying food? I think that some of the more honest ones, people would say so. Yeah, I've heard podcasts in which people are interviewed, and they'll admit, yeah, I'm obese because I like pizza. Pizza's good.
Right.
It's like, okay.
Pizza is definitely good though, bro.
Sure,
I had
sure.
that for breakfast this morning.
Yeah, sure. But,
Guilty.
it's more just an issue of like, it's a level of discipline. It's sort of like, think of if you got, it's like being hooked on sugar or hooked on food. It's like,
Right.
If you're hooked on cigarettes, I'm not trying to say this out of any disrespect to smokers, but, often it takes a lot of discipline to get off, to become no longer addicted.
Absolutely.
And that's sort of what we encourage. We encourage that discipline.
Right.
If you're an
Speaks of
alcoholic,
character. Right.
People sometimes will say, basically straighten up, become disciplined, to quit drinking so much.
Right.
I mean, why is it that we can't say that about, people being addicted to food?
We can't say that yet until enough people suffer and die. And I don't know how we're not at the point, right, where that isn't already the case, right? And so you have these people pushing us to that brink where it will then become a social crisis, or recognized as such, like widespread, when the death toll is massive and we're cutting, right, the life expectancy of millions of human beings. That's millions of years that we're losing of potential and talent and life and enjoyment and happiness. So I'm already at that point. Maybe like the rest of us will finally get there as well.
Yeah, I hope so. I certainly do. Yeah, I don't really know what all we can say about this anymore. This is just honestly a bit depressing.
Right. Yeah, I was laughing earlier. Now I'm like,
I mean, this is kind of the point where it's so sad you have to laugh. Like, I don't really know what else you do about this, And America's exceptionally bad about this. We have more obese adults here than any other country does, although China's very quickly catching up. They even are creating fat camps for their kids because they just eat too much, I guess.
Right.
I don't know. I think, though, and even Africa, a lot of the poorest countries in Africa, as they become wealthier, are having an obesity problem. And, great irony given people's popular perception of most of sub-Saharan Africa.
Right.
But I think that this is becoming a global problem. Unfortunately, America's leading the way. Oh, great, the rest of the world is going to get dragged in. Presumably, we tend to think of America, right, as, somewhere that is, leading the world into good directions. And certainly that's what we should aspire to do. Unfortunately, I guess we can also lead the world into bad trends. So ideally, maybe if we can arrest this trend, the rest of the world can follow as well. Because certainly, as much as I consider, American issues to be mostly something of my concern, other countries, certainly, I hope, can avoid some of the problems that we've been facing, and hopefully can similarly recover from these problems as we do. And
that's what I said. We're like the canary in the mine, except for
yeah,
we have a few extra pounds on us, right?
Yeah,
we can't even get out.
It's a canary who like falls on the ground.
Doesn't even get in the mine.
Can't even start flying.
Oh my god! When the American canary should be like have the stature of an eagle, right? So it's that kind of pride and boldness and intrepidness that defines, America's swiftness and strength.
Yeah. Right. I'll leave you with some I don't even know how to say this, inspiring quotes.
Okay.
So how thin people can be allies for a cultural change, and this is from that Fat Acceptance vs. Body Positivity article. If you find yourself in the body positive movement and want to center fat activism as well, work on being an ally. Allyship is a verb, and anyone can be an ally to the fat activist and acceptance movements. Use your voice not only to lift up others, but to help fight back against those who are actively causing harm to others. Well, that is enough ridiculousness for now. I think we can agree shame on this movement. I hope. I just please take care of yourselves, if nothing else, fat activists, and just certainly don't lead anyone else into this silliness. Don't cause any more deaths, please.